And thankfully, like always, I have with me one of the other daughters and the one and only dad. Good morning and good afternoon to the two of you.
Good morning.
Here we go. Okay, so Dad.
Did you get a good morning from her?
Perfect, perfect, perfect. Well, good morning and afternoon to all of our viewers and listeners. Thank you guys so much for tuning in with us. And so today we want to talk a little bit about what does it look like cultivating the next generation in our business or in business. And so before we hit record, Jennifer was kind of telling us her realization or her experience now that she's having that our little Eva is been in the business really with Jennifer now. And so Jen, why don't you start out with your story of Eva and then how we kind of came to this topic.
Yeah, so it started with what a client had said to me, right? And she said to me maybe last week that she believes that if you're an entrepreneur and you have children, then it's more likely for your children to become entrepreneurs. And so that started to get me thinking right off of that topic. And I shared that with the team here. And I have been thinking about how, with us growing up, and really my whole life, dad has been an entrepreneur, right? And I remember kind of like going when he first bought the building and, going to clean it up and doing landscaping because he didn't have no money for a landscaper at the time and making us pull weeds and being kind of a part of that. And as we got older, like we would kind of get excited to go to the office because we got to like copy papers for him and file them. And we thought we were cool. Like, yeah, my dad's the boss. It's the coolest. And so now what I'm witnessing with my daughter is those questions are starting to come up, right? And so she asked me, like, because you're the boss, is that why you have to go in so late? Or is that why you have to work so late? Do you need to be the first one there? Um, and so she's starting to take interest. Like she likes to tell people, like, my mom's a hairdresser, and the way that she says the business name is so cute. So anyway, she thinks I'm the coolest because I'm a hairdresser. So I'll take that for now. But she likes to be in the salon. And just recently, she's like, I've mastered sweeping. I don't want to sweep hair anymore. I want to be more hands-on. Like, can I wash someone's hair? Right. So again, it's not necessarily that I'm overly intentional about having her inside the salon with me. It just happens. And so the beauty kind of entrepreneurship is that things have to happen all the time. And she pretty much knows every other Monday we come to the salon to do payroll. Like, Mom, do we have to do payroll today? Like, it's just part of our routine. It's what we do. Um, and so she's a part of it, right? Without me like forcing her to be a part of it. And so knowing kind of that statement that my client made to me, kind of thinking back about how dad was with us, thinking about what's happening with Eva, it really started to make me think, will this lifestyle be attractive to Eva? Now, I already think my daughter has natural leadership abilities. She's very bossy already.
She's very direct.
Yes.
She's not bossy. She's direct.
She thrives that she wants to be like the line leader. She wants to hold the doors. Like, I'm seeing it, guys. I'm seeing it already. I think I sound silly when I say that, but I'm being honest. So
We
I
all see it.
am believing,
We all
what
see it.
is, what the client really said. And so when I kind of look back at our childhood, kind of, and again, I don't think dad was necessarily doing it intentionally, but it's like, hey, certain things have to get done. It's the weekend. I got my kids with me. You guys are going to come. You guys are going to come with me and we're going to do some of these things. And so I had been attracted to entrepreneurship from a very young age. I didn't know kind of what that meant, but I knew that that was always what I wanted to pursue. And here I am, 35 years old in that world. But again, not because dad forced it on us. Not that he never said, like, you shouldn't go to college, you should go to college, you should be an entrepreneur. He really did let me explore what was best for me. He never really forced me in a certain direction. But I think there's something there. I think there's something there to be talked about with our kids and entrepreneurship and just kind of being involved and understanding what it is that we do. And interesting enough, I just hired a new hairdresser inside of our business, and her mom is a hairdresser. And so she was sharing with me that she had been inspired her whole life watching her mom be a hairdresser, and she always knew that she wanted to do it. And now here she is being a hairdresser. So I think there's something to all of this conversation around the next generation of entrepreneurs.
Dad, you were leaning in.
Yeah, well, there is. And I mean, I think Jennifer, is hitting it right on the head, is that it's more, I think when it comes to your children, especially if you are, in business as an entrepreneur, when your children, are at a young age, they observe, they're living that life as your children, and they're seeing things. So I don't think for me, it wasn't necessary to say, I'm doing this someday so that you guys can come into this business and, just have all this, success. That was never, because again, that would be trying to coerce or direct, but I think you see it quite often. I think we heard some statistics earlier before we started recording of the percentage of children that do go into some type of entrepreneurship, if they've seen their parents do that. Maybe it's their business that the parents started or something like that. But I think they see that and grow up with that, and they're maybe more comfortable with that because they've seen that in their family. So there's certainly, the challenge is, it might not be a business you want your kids to come into, but that's something that you have to, have that conversation around. But I think it's important that once you see that, your kids are starting to show that interest, start to, include them. Now again, I mean, I brought you guys around the business quite a bit, not because I wanted you to start learning the business, but I had stuff that I needed to do, and I wanted to spend time with you. I didn't want to take my weekends and be doing things around the office like landscaping and all that and miss that time, with you. So rather than miss it, I made you go with me. So and that worked out. But but the important thing about that, and you'll hear those stories, is that you begin to see what it does take, to be, in business, that it's not just about showing up and doing your craft, just as you mentioned, Jennifer, Eva's like, is today payroll, we're here to do payroll, that she's already starting to understand those things because she's there with you, because the same reason I took you guys with me. You don't want to be separated from her, so you include her. And it's something that, you're spending time with her. And it doesn't sound like she dreads it. So, and that's a nice thing. And that wasn't something that you guys like, oh, I don't want to go. I never really heard that because, I let you run copies, but I also let you run copies of your face and your hands, and I won't say what other body parts you wanted to try to get a copy of.
Oh, the other part for Joel, for sure.
Yeah, Joel was right. So I think I still have some of those photocopies around the office somewhere.
Yeah.
But so you made it fun too. So, but yeah, it's it is something that I think as a entrepreneur and a parent that's an entrepreneur, you need to be thinking about, need to be getting prepared for, and you need to understand, what's the way to communicate, the expectations. And personally, I'm not saying, everybody make their own decision, but I don't think you should be trying to direct. I think, most people would say, oh, I want my kids to go to college. I want my kids to get a degree, and that might be perfectly appropriate. But I really took the approach. I want them to kind of find themselves, find out who they are, find out what makes them tick. If college, makes sense, then, let's by all means pursue that. If it's, a trade school like you did, Jennifer, Stacy, you went that route, then let's do that, but let me not set the expectation. Let those things kind of happen based on, based on who you are as individuals, and just so happens everybody's in some type of entrepreneurial role. So, but it wasn't, like you said, it wasn't my goal for that to happen. I'm happy, very happy, but that was not my goal. So, I think that's important for a parent or parents who have businesses to consider how they're going to approach all of that.
Well, and I think it's interesting as you're saying that, Dad, of like, I think when you're an entrepreneur, obviously you have a certain kind of mindset. And so being open to letting your kids find out what they are passionate about, what they're interested in. And I think that you were always really good at that, of like, if you find something you're passionate about, that you're interested in, that you're good at, how can we make that into a business? How can we make money from that? And so I can see sometimes you hear parents that are like, go to college, get a job, get health benefits. It's the safest thing. They're kind of closed-minded. I think entrepreneurs can be very much more open-minded to things. And so that kind of goes onto your kids. Like, I had no fear in opening a business, even though there were plenty of fears out there, right? Like, what happens if my parents never made me fearful of opening a business. They never said, well, what if, right? So I think even now when I'm looking at my daughter who's passionate about horses, and she's like, when can I have a horse? I want a horse. And I'm thinking, maybe one day I'm going to own some horses. You start thinking of the greater possibility of, if this really is what she's passionate about, how can we, make this work? How can we make this into a business? How can, she follow her passion in this way? And so instead of saying like, horses can just be fun, but you need to go to college, right? You're more open-minded to the possibilities of what you can really see your child do in the world. And that, I think, is really a blessing, because you have no idea how many times I heard people say, oh, I always wanted to be a hairdresser, but my parents wouldn't let me, right? So I do think that maybe entrepreneurs have that going for us, that we kind of can see the bigger picture through what our kids are passionate about.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I've seen, kids who, I see it in our business who, if somebody said to them back when they were, teenagers, oh, I want you to go into the insurance business. Probably not too many kids heard that, right? Unless maybe, the parent was in the insurance business, but that wouldn't be something. But it's amazing how many people are in this profession that went to college to get degrees into something else, but ultimately landed in the insurance because it is entrepreneurial, and obviously the opportunities for income and and to be really in control of your own destiny is much greater. So they maybe went to school for another type of career. like engineering or something like that. But then just to get out to find out it really wasn't meeting them where they had hoped it would meet them, in terms of, what's bringing them, um, satisfaction, what's bringing them security, so that's where that finding yourself, and sometimes you have to go through that process. You have to go through the process of, finding yourself because you don't know. So maybe that's through college, but there's so many different options out there today too. And I think one of the things that we're learning is that, college is good, but it maybe isn't what it was once touted to be. And I'm just kind of putting my own opinion. But when I talk to a lot of people, you're hearing that more and more, where there was a time when everybody pushed their kids to go to college, and that's the way to get ahead in the world, and to have a degree. And again, a lot of truth to that, but we're also seeing now where a lot of people did that, walked out with, unfortunately, a lot of debt, and only to find themselves doing things that they probably could have gotten trained for, educated for a lot less money, so to speak. So, just allowing that process to, maybe play out a little more, is the appropriate approach, especially in today's world. But there's, the entrepreneur. I mean, and maybe we're going to talk about this before we end, but I think the other thing that it's important for entrepreneurs to understand is, if you have a successful business, but don't have that next generation coming in, to maybe take over. Now, what's your thought process? What are you thinking now? Because again, a lot of people want their kids to come into their business, not only because, they've worked hard to build something up to pass on, but, they want that next generation and beyond potentially to, really benefit from their hard work of starting and getting a business off the ground. But not everybody has that. Not everybody has kids. Not everybody has kids that want to come into that business. I mean, I see it quite often, with our clients. And, so now what? Where do you go from there? And so that's probably a whole other podcast, but, you definitely want to start to cultivate, hopefully, maybe it's employees, key employees, in your business to potentially be that next generation of owner in your business, whether it be, again, something you do over time. But I've seen a lot of people wait, and then they're looking to start to phase out or slow down or retire, and really don't have any place to go with their business because there's no next generation. So now they're trying to figure out, how to sell that business. And, some businesses that could be a very easy thing to do, others not so easy, depending on the type of business. So certainly being aware of who your employees are, who maybe has that entrepreneur spirit, start to cultivate them, train them, bringing them into that is another important component, to kind of this discussion, I believe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
sometimes, even with the next generation with your kids, sometimes you'll have kids be passionate. I can see that kind of in my siblings that are like, look at what dad has built. I'm passionate about kind of what he's built. I want to carry it on. I want to, be a part of this. And then obviously maybe you have kids that are not. And so obviously we don't think you should force your kids into taking over a business that they don't ultimately want to do. But I think it's always important, we've talked about that before on the podcast, where keeping an eye out for some level of recruitment, right? Of you know, the possibilities of somebody else stepping into your role, into a leadership role, really, working with them to develop um, on how to run a business, just developing those skills and having kind of an exit strategy in that way. I think both are hard, right? Whether it's your kids, the next generation stepping in, or it's somebody else, it can be a difficult transition, but obviously something that we want to do when it comes to business. I cut you off, Stace.
No, I was just going to say, I agree with, obviously everything you guys are saying. I think that one of the important points, and you said it, Jen, was that I think one of the things that Dad always did was, oh, this is something you're interested in. Was there a way to make money at this so that you can keep doing it? Right? Like you love dance. Oh, well, let's kind of think. And he would say these phrases like, no, I want to know now. He's like, well, we need to just be thinking about in the next 5 years. It's like, 5 years, sir. I need to know something right now. He's like, well, that's not how this works. But like, how can we think through so that you can keep doing this? But guess what, girl? You need to make some money. Right. You're gonna need to make some money, and if this is something you really enjoy doing, and you want to do it, why not make money at it? And I also having another generation coming in that can either carry on what's been started or even expand. I know Dad and I have clients that a married couple, they've been cattle or beef farmers their whole lives. Their daughter went off, got a culinary degree, and went and would go on cruise ships and be a chef. Now she's back home after doing that for 10 years and just completely exploded their business in a great way by saying, hey, I know how to make these dishes. I can we can still sell our beef, but we can bring in other products. I mean, they have this booming store now that it for them came out of left field, that we're like, hey, we thinking our kid's going to be a chef. And now realizing that being here and being part of the family and wanting to be near family, how can I take my talent and now use it to really expand on the family business? And so for them, they're kind of, next generation wanting to be a part of the business happened without it necessarily being the exact way that her parents were in the business. So, but it's all good conversation, all good stuff. So we hope our listeners and our viewers today found this to be helpful, and we will see you guys in our next episode. Bye-bye.